Hi there, and welcome back to the Director's Chair. My name is Stacy Swickert, and I'm currently the Education Chair for the Port Tobacco Players. We have designed this series of conversations with directors to give you kind of an inside perspective, a chance, if you will, to hear some of the inner workings of our directors' minds. It is with great pleasure that I am speaking with Keith Linville this evening. He is one of our directors at PTP. He's known to be a special effects person. He's done a lot of different jobs and worn a lot of different hats at our theater. He is a beloved member of our community. So it's with wonderful pleasure that I welcome Keith Linville this evening. Sit back and enjoy in the director's chair. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on to the director's chair tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, are you kidding? I'm a little sad that we're not going to get to do our show.
Yeah.
However,
but those things happen.
They do. And that just means that I will look forward to the next adventure that you and I can do together.
That's right.
Well, I'm going to start with the first question, which is, what was the first production that you ever directed for PTP?
Okay, well, it's two answers, because the first production that I ever directed for PTP was a one act. At the One Act Festival, we went up to Frederick, and it was Morning Coffee. And it was a one act. The first main stage show that I did was Don't Drink the Water. That was a Woody Allen written play. And we did that when we were out of the theater. That was over at the Government Center. But the very first one I did was Morning Coffee. It was a two-person show. Dave Standish helped with the show. He did a lot of stuff. Craig and Amy Cooksey were in it. There were several folks, involved with it. We had a nice little set that we took around. In fact, I think the set was the only part that the adjudicators even liked. I don't think the adjudicators liked the script. They hated the characters. It was kind of funny because the characters in and of themselves they were breaking up. Morning Coffee was a show about two people who were breaking up. They weren't married, they were in a relationship. And so they were breaking up, and they weren't perfect people to begin with. They each had, very flawed people. So they weren't really nice people. And just the adjudicators mostly talked about how they didn't like the characters and not necessarily the actors. They didn't like the characters, and they didn't like the script and stuff like that. So, and that, they loved the set though. The set got an award. So, but it was fun. We had a good time. We went up there and did the show up there and had a good time. It was really pretty. And then we came back and did it at the Black Box a couple of evenings, and that was fun. But then 6 months later, I got to do my first main stage show. Like I said, that was at the Government Center when we were out of house. That was for a comedy, it had a lot of people in it. It was just one set. There weren't set pieces that you were moving in and out. It was one set piece. It was set in Romania, as I remember, and it was during the Cold War. It had a bunch of people in it. People going in and out of, it was set in the embassy in Romania, and a family had accidentally taken pictures of a missile site. And so they fled into the American embassy, and the communist government was trying to get them out and arrest them. And so it was a comedy. It was funny. I learned a lot from that about having so many moving pieces in a show. I mean, moving pieces as far as people goes.
Mm-hmm.
Having a lot of people in the show, and so that was interesting. It was my very first show. We were out of house, so there were a lot of things to learn from that. It was I had a good time with it. I had a lot of fun people in the show. Had a lot of people I wouldn't cast again in the show. Stuff like that. That's what you kind of learn.
Right. So let me ask you, because I'm thinking back, was your one act originally I've been a member for a while back in the day, and you had to do a one act as part of your training, if you will, to be a director. Was that still the case when you were doing your one act?
Yeah, that's kind of what we tried to start, and we did it a little bit. That's when we were starting that process. We kind of said, yeah, do a one act or assistant direct with somebody. And so I did the one act, and then I did the main stage show, and that's kind of what we were trying to do at that time. And
what year was that? Do you remember?
What was that?
What year was that?
Seems to me
early 90s, I'm thinking.
Oh no, actually that's when we tore down the stage and did the rebuild and built the tower and everything. So that would have been like 2004, 2005.
Oh wow. Later than I thought.
Yeah, so I've only been at the theater since 99.
Okay, because when I did, so I directed a one act. That was my cutting my teeth business in 89. And thank goodness Bill Graves was in my cast, because I picked O'Neill, of all things, to do one act. And I was like 18 years old and had no idea what I was doing. But that was the process to be a director. PTP wanted you to direct a one act and assistant direct. So I also assistant directed, but talk about that was trial by fire.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I was like, nope, directing is not for me.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple I did, I kind of learned a lot about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, because I've done almost did 6 shows. I've almost directed, well, I think 7 if you count the one act. I'd have to count them all up. And the one that dearly beloved I didn't get to do, but I got kind of halfway through it. So that would have made the 7th.
I'm so sad.
I know. That was but I learned, the first couple.
Talk about that for a minute, because we're in the pandemic. So tell me about your thought process about having a show, casting a show, and then having to put it on the shelf.
Well, it's kind of a dichotomy of feelings there, because for one thing is that I had a cast that I really liked, and I felt bad not getting to work with them, because I saw there was a lot of funny, you could see the characters starting to develop, and we didn't get real far into the process, but you could see the characters starting to develop, and you could see that it was going to be funny. But I could also see, for me, the trouble spots for me as far as the show was going to be when I looked at the way that the show is set up, with those tables everywhere for the dinner. Blocking around those tables was going to be a problem. And so I was trying to figure out how we were going to block around those tables. So I was starting to see, and we were starting to work around how we were going to fix those. And as we just started to figure out, we could solve one problem, and then that kind of came up. And in some ways it was, I kind of I felt bad, like I said, for not being able to finish up working with everybody. The other thing, though, was that because right in the middle of that time frame, I had that real bad health issue that came up. And right after we got to the point where the pandemic came in and we had to suspend things, I was going through, I was still having a lot of vertigo with the the issue I was having, and I was still having a lot of confusion where I couldn't remember things. And my short-term memory was really bad. And I'd talked to Giselle and I talked to Debbie about it. And specifically, I talked to Debbie several times about it. And I was telling her, at a lot of times I said, if we go back and we complete the show, I'm going to need a lot of help,
right?
Because I can't remember things. I get confused really easy. Now, at this point, the neurologist has put me on some different medications, and he even has me on a monthly shot that I have to take, which has helped remove, the dizziness, and my confusion has abated to a great degree. I still get confused, a little bit, and I search for words still quite often, but I don't find myself as confused as I was, because there were, a lot of times where I would get, easily confused about what I was doing, and I would have a couple of episodes where I could feel myself kind of forgetting where I was. I mean, it only lasted for a minute or two. It wasn't like the episode I had when I ended up having to go to the emergency room. But
it's still disconcerting. Terribly disconcerting.
Yeah, so that was, so in a way, that part of it is a relief, because I wasn't sure how good a job I would be able to do, and I would really need, I was really going to have to rely on Hannah assistant directing with me, because I was going to be very confused with some things. And so I was disappointed, but I was also, on the other hand, I was like, if it goes away, maybe that's what's meant to be, because of because of my situation.
Interestingly enough, I kind of felt the same way, for different reasons, obviously, but I was very excited. Thankfully, were putting me back on stage for the first time since like the early 90s. I hadn't been on stage. But at the same time, once the pandemic hit and we were teaching virtually, that's a whole different way of teaching, and a whole different, so all of a sudden my plate got so much bigger, and and it just kept getting piled higher and higher. And I was kind of like, okay, I really, really want to be back on stage, and what a wonderful cast and fun people to play off of. But at the same time, I want to be able to do the best possible job. And knowing that there's so much else going on in the world was taking my attention. So I kind of felt a little like you did, I think, at that point. But again, like I said, it just means that I'm looking so much forward to when we're open again, and when we're all together again and can do, fun things again. And that's the great thing about the piece you picked, was it was just fun. I remember reading it and just laughing out loud. And that leads me kind of into my next question. Like, what do you consider, what kinds of things do you consider when you're picking pieces?
It's kind of funny, because it depends on, because a lot of times I'm on the play reading committee. I like to be on the play reading committee because that gives me a chance, to read scripts, because I never really got into the theater until 99. Rick Wathen and Amy Cooksey and Jeff Merritt, I worked with all of them. And so they were the ones who got me into the theater. And so I started going in the mid 90s. I started going to stuff. I had been to one show at PTP a long, long time ago in the early 80s. I went to see A Christmas Carol with Gordon Brown. And I wasn't so much interested in, it's complete opposite of what most people want to do in theater, is that I didn't care what was happening on stage. What I was interested in is when they went through the door, what was happening when they went through the door? That's all I cared about. Is I wanted to know what people were doing when they were standing back there, because I couldn't see them, but I wanted to know what was happening. Were there people back there? What did they do? What did the people standing back there do? Where did the people go when they left the stage? What did they do next? All of those type of things were just fascinating to me, which, kind of explains why I've always been more drawn to being a tech person than actually being an actor. Even though I do enjoy the opportunity to be on stage, but I've always liked the tech side of it, more. And so when I started being in the playwriting committee, and it offered me a chance to read shows that I didn't know anything about. And I have a tendency to like odd shows. A show that has a swamp in it is going to catch my eye. I love a show with a swamp. The Hound of the Baskervilles had the Moor in it. I directed Duck Hunter Shoots Angel, that almost the whole show takes place in a swamp. I love swamps. I'm just snakes. I love a good swamp. So I love shows that have swamps in them. I like weird characters in shows. The Dearly Beloved had a ton of weird characters in it. So it's a fun little show. When it's not that type of thing, it has to be, I like comedies, but I also like dramas, depending upon the drama, if it just kind of grabs me. But the weird one that's not really necessarily something that I would be drawn to was the second main stage show I ever did was The Christmas Schooner.
Oh, okay.
And I selected that one because I was on the playwriting committee, and they sent us a video that was kind of a promotional video, and it opens up with submersible, because it's based loosely on a true story. And so the video is going down and showing the Christmas schooner at the bottom of the Lake Michigan. And then they show all of the, skeletons of the Christmas trees and the wrecked ship and stuff like that. And it was almost like a Titanic, the Titanic moment at the beginning of Titanic, when you see all of the, when you see the wreck of the ship and all the stuff like that. It was like my Titanic moment. And I really got into the show, and I felt like I wanted to direct it. And so I did, and I had a really great cast and really great people working with me. And John Merritt built the ship, and everything was really cool. And what I learned from directing a musical is that it's too hard. Directing a musical is hard because I'm not a musician and I'm not a dancer. So I don't know 2/3 of the thing. I mean, I know when I like what the dancing looks like, and I know when I like what the music looks like, but if there's something wrong with the music, I don't know how to correct it or anything like that. So for 2/3 of the show, I'm taking everybody else's, input into it.
That's what Bill Graves said as well. Bill Graves said something very similar. He's like, I'm just not a musical person. So when I do a musical, I have to have somebody that I can trust to be my music director. And you rely on them.
That's right. And that was the other thing, because after I did Christmas Schooner, which has a bunch of people in it, and like 15 some people in it, and then I did the first main stage show, which was we talked about, Don't Drink the Water, which had like 12 or 13, 14 people in it. I don't like a show that has a lot of people in it. It's too many moving parts. So I prefer a show that has maybe 7, 8 people in it, something like that. Dearly Beloved is getting up to the top end of the amount of people that I can juggle, because I have a strange way when I'm working on it of blocking the show for myself. Is I sit down with the script and I go through the whole show, and I have back in the 90s, they used to sell these little figures called homies, and you could buy them for $0.25 in the store. And I set the people out on the set and I move them around, and that's where I kind of figure out what I want my basic blocking to look like, and I move my homies around with it. And if I've got too many people to move around, I can't keep track, and they're falling over, and it's hard to keep track of all that many people. So I prefer a show that has 6, 7 people in it, and that's what I kind of look for. And of course, a swamp and 6 or 7 people is what I like. So
that's amazing. So you kind of walked me through a little bit, but talk to me more about your process. Like you kind of talked about the blocking, but what else?
What I do is, I think the most important thing is the casting. You gotta, that's 70-80% of the show, I think, is getting a good cast. And then from there, once you get your cast set up, I kind of put it in, it's a thing I've talked to Tessa, and Tessa and I have kind of talked about a couple of times, is that she calls it, like she sets a skeleton up. And that's kind of what I was doing, and I didn't put it in those words, is that I put the blocking in, and then it's just a basic skeleton of the blocking. And then I see how it goes and what people want to do. And then you just add more, you put more muscle and more muscle and you start to put the organs and the skin and stuff on, because the original blocking is not what it's going to look like. And so you start out with a basic blocking, and then you just kind of see how it looks, and you go, "Ugh, I really hate that. That's just not working," and you fix it. And then you try something else. And what a lot of times happens is that early on in the process, you don't have all your people there. And so then when somebody else comes in, they're moving a little differently, and that doesn't look right. And then the set comes in, and you have to change things a little bit more. And so you start out with your basic skeleton, and then you just keep putting more and more stuff in. And the blocking part evolves as it goes along. And then you're fussing about the lines as you go along, and how you kind of want that to be played out, and where you want them to be kind of focusing and looking, and how you want them to move and stuff like that. And the main thing is that you just got to keep watching it, and it evolves as it evolves as it goes along. And I think, this part I never really talked to other directors about, but I'm sure they feel the same way, because when I sit and watch the show, and as a director, a lot of directors just, when the show goes up, they just don't go back anymore. But I like to go back and watch the show a lot of times, And when I watch it, I go, gosh, I wish I'd have done that a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Or nah, I wish I'd done that a little different. And I think sometimes you just kind of keep seeing things that you wish you would have done, a little bit differently. I think that kind of teaches you a little bit too.
Absolutely. Reflective, that
Yeah.
reflective process. So what production that you have done presented you with the most challenges, do you think?
Well, the first one, of course, don't drink the water, was a lot of challenges. Duck Hunter Shoots Angel had over 100 and some light cues because it was, it took place in a swamp, and there were a lot of you had ghosts and angels and all kinds of weird things, and the two guys are going through, they're going through the swamp. They're looking for an angel, and they think they see God, and it's a helicopter. And now they think they see, an angel or, this thing, and it is an angel, and all these, other things. And so all of these things are done with lights. It's not a lot of shows you would think, shows that I would like to do would have a lot of special effects. Well, it wasn't a special effects show. It was all done with lights pretty much. The only effect we had was an alligator head, which a couple of kids from Westlake built, and it was a big paper mache alligator head, and it was really cute and worked out great. Zach Ball and Stevie Charnock switched off wearing the alligator head for the show because there was an alligator creature in the show, and because basically the show is about like reporters from those tabloid magazines trying to find this angel that's appeared in the swamp, and so and supposedly a duck hunter accidentally shot the angel, and so now they're running around trying to find this angel in the swamp that got shot by the duck hunter, and the tabloid people are running around out there, and one of the big stories is the alligator man that the tabloid had told. And so the alligator man keeps showing up, and he's an important part of the story. He moves the story along in spots.
Nice. Very nice. What do you think, as a director, what do you consider your biggest challenge?
Moving the people around, especially moving them around the set pieces. One of the first shows that I ever AD'd for was All My Sons, and it had a swing in the middle of it, and the director would show up for like the first 30 minutes of the rehearsal, and then he would leave and go to work, and he just left it for me. And I had a bunch of directors on stage, and we would have a bunch of I had a bunch of directors on stage. Legitimately, those were people who directed shows. Craig and Sheila Draper and Randy Tusing, a bunch of people who had directed shows on stage. And I kind of had to be their eyes out there to tell them what things look like, and then they would ask questions, and I would say, okay, well, we'll move here. It looks different. And the swing set always there was a downstage glider swing thing that they would sit in, and that's when I learned that when people get behind things, like they get behind couches and they stand behind tables, and when you stand behind things, it's just something that drives me crazy in shows. And maybe it's something that's okay, and maybe it's something that's not okay. and it depends on how long they're back there and what's happening with the action of the show. But it's something that always drives me crazy, and I'm always trying to work them out from behind those pieces. And how do you naturally do it and not make it look like, because I'm sure that people, if anybody knows me very well, would know, well, there's Keith trying to get the person out from behind the stuff, you know. So it's a movement of the actors on stage. And it's a funny thing, because when in the last show I was in, which you know, my short-term memory, Brian Donahue directed it. It's the one about the girls.
Crucible.
Yeah, the Crucible.
Mm-hmm.
He said that every scene is a chase scene, which is, you know, and that's one of the things that, because I never had really any director's training, I learned a lot from every director that I've worked with or been in a show with. Some, and not in a bad way, some directors you learn things that you don't want to do. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing, like, ooh, I would never do that. But you kind of learn things that, yeah, that's not my style. But you learn things because they say specific things, like the thing I said about Tessa talking about a skeleton of blocking and then filling it in as you go along with the show. And this thing that Brian said was every scene is a chase scene, and it kind of is true, because it starts out and then you move through the whole entire scene, how you move along and where it ends up.
Right.
And that kind of, you know, the movement part of it is what is always the thing that gives me the most trouble. And I've read books about it and stuff like that. And the funny thing is that almost every book you read about directing, they never agree with each other, because there's so many different directors, and theater people hate to agree with each other.
Well, there's no drama if everybody agrees, and
That's
we
right.
like our drama.
They agree with each other.
We like our drama.
Yes.
That being said, is there a valuable personal lesson that you've learned from directing?
Yes. Don't waste people's time. People resent you wasting their time. They may not say it specifically to your face, but as time goes on, it shows in their attitude. Mm-hmm. They may be professional while they're on the stage, but you see it more and more, and they may not come out for your show next time. It may show personally in certain things, but if you waste people's time, like I've been in shows with people who will call everybody for act one, and you may have a person who's in, 30 seconds of act one, and they may have to drive 45 minutes to be there. They may come from St. Mary's County, and they may be there for 45, 45, drive 45 minutes to get there, and they're in two lines, and you do that. Okay, that's it. And you don't really have any notes for them. You don't really have anything important to tell them. Okay, thanks. And then you don't let them go right away either. You keep them till the end of the evening, and you have no notes for them, send them home. Don't waste people's time. That is a horrible thing. None of us are professionals in community theater. We all have other things. I'm retired, so it's not as bad for me, but most of the people, 75 to 80% of the people have a job. A lot of them people are kids, mm-hmm. and their parents are getting very antsy to get those kids by 9:30, 10 o'clock. And during tech week, when it's going toward 11 o'clock and the parents are pacing and getting really antsy, and they want to get those kids home because they've got other kids they got to deal with, and that kid maybe hasn't done their homework yet. Don't waste people's times. They do not appreciate it.
Nope. And you're absolutely right. I remember being that kid too. I remember being, in high school and doing shows with PPP and sitting there and nothing for me to do. Not sure why I'm here tonight. And as I got older, I was more aware of it. Like when I was a kid, it was just exciting to be there. But I wasn't the parent trying to get the homework done. I wasn't the parent, like you just said. I was the kid that was just excited to be a part of something.
Yeah.
But as you get older and you have a day job and you have to get up and drive to work, you're like, wait, why am I still here at 10:30?
I mean, and it's a good thing to learn in life as well. Don't waste people's time anywhere. I mean, it reminds me, early on, I was in a show with Gordon O'Neill, and we had a specific director who he would keep us really late. I mean, we would have a 2-hour rehearsal, and then he would routinely keep us over an hour giving us notes. They would go forever and ever and ever. And then some people, of course, don't just take a note and say, thank you. And then if they have a specific question, see the director afterward. They got to stop and talk to the director in the middle of notes for 5 minutes, and it drives everybody crazy. And I was sitting next to Gordon O'Neill, and Gordon, of course, added a little flowery language that I'm not gonna add. But one guy kept getting a note, and then he would get another note, and then he would get another note, and then the guy, every time he would get a note, he would have an explanation, and then he would go on and on, and he was slowing the whole process down. And we probably had spent, I would imagine, 10, 12 minutes additional just off of this guy. And finally, Gordon, this guy finally got just one too many notes, and Gordon just said to me, he said, "It's never that guy's fault."
You hit on one of my all-time favorite people from PPP. Mm-hmm. And I was a high school kid, and I was stage managing. I was assistant stage managing our 40th review, the 40th anniversary review. And Gordon was one of my all-time favorite people. He would come sit next to me, and he, like, right before he went on stage, and he would sit down and he'd be rolling up his pants. He was getting ready to go out and do The King and I. And he would roll up his pants and he'd look over at me and he says, "I can't remember my first line." You do this to me every night, Gordon. But just the nicest man, the most generous of spirit and talented, wonderful. Like, if there was any doubt why I became a theater kid, it was because of people like Gordon O'Neill. He was always a joy to be in a show with, because he would always say funny things, and he would just, even when he was much older, you wouldn't think, but he was still so observational, and he was still on the money, and he would just, know what was about to happen and what people were about, and he would just... An amazing man. That was our little thing, was he would sit next to me, and he would just look at me and say, I don't know my first line. And I'm like, yes, you do. Don't do that. He's like, maybe you should go on tonight. And I'm like, that is so never going to happen. So roll up your pants and out you go.
Yeah, I feel bad for the new people who never got a chance to work with some of those folks, like, Gordon and Bridget, folks like that.
My gosh. And Rich Hybe was actually my first director. And
Rich was fun.
Oh my gosh. Just absolutely loved Rich. He came along at the perfect time in my life when I was a kid to kind of mentor and be just kind of a sage, kind of dry wit that I needed at that time. So it was funny. All the rest of the time, he was always very relaxed. But the first time I ever was in a show with him, they hooked me in as a replacement to 1940s Radio Hour. And it was that half hour loose thing that happens at the beginning, where all this stuff is going on pre-show of the Radio Hour, and it's just taking too long. People are not hitting their cues, they're not picking up lines and stuff like that. And it was my first day, and he got mad because everybody was just dragging. And he said, "I'll cut all of it out." He said, "I don't care." He said, "I'll cut all of it out."
and we'll just do the radio part of it. I don't care. I'll cut it all out. And I was like, uh-oh. But that wasn't Rich at all. That's not the way Rich was.
Nope.
He just, he would just get on them. And because I came in during Tech Week, and he just told me, he said, here's the script. He said, be here, be here, be here. Don't draw focus during this song. Don't draw focus during this song, and don't draw focus during this song. Other than that, do whatever you want. Because I was up in the booth, and I was the guy who sets the booth on fire.
Oh, nice.
I was the sound booth guy in 1940s Radio Hour. And so I would just come down and steal Jeff Merritt's hot dog and flirt with Cindy Johnson and all the stuff like that. And that was just what my character was supposed to do. And I climb up the ladder and change a light and stuff like that. And so he said, be here, be here, be here, and don't steal focus during these 3 songs. And other than that, do everything you want to do. And so I did. And it was a lot of fun.
He's a lot of fun to work with. I auditioned for him. I think I was a sophomore in high school, and he was doing Hot L Baltimore. And of course, the only young girl in that is a hooker. So I was like, oh, well, that's for me. And I auditioned, and he was really cute because he came up afterward and he went, you can't sell that. And I was like, but maybe I could. And he's like, you can't. What else would you like to do? And I was like, well, I don't know. I maybe backstage. And he's like, great, you're backstage. There you go. Can you be here every night? And I was like, yeah, I could be here. And that's really how I got started, was because it was my first show auditioning, and Rich was the director, and he just was very sweet and very kind of laid back and walked up and went, yeah, you really can't sell that. And I was like, no, I can. And he's like, no, you can't. But he gave me an opportunity to still be part of something. And that sold it for me from that point on. Pretty much I was backstage for many years doing, assistant stage managing and special effects and lights and that kind of stuff. So I have to thank him for that, because that's my start. He was amazing.
Yeah, he was a lot of fun. And Dean.
Oh, I love Dean. Dean. I was very lucky to come up in that time frame, because it was Gordon Brown and Gordon O'Neill and Rich and Dean and of course Bridget and Cindy Brown, Cindy Brown Johnson. And so I was very lucky. I had a lot of wonderful adults around me, in high school who and even Carol Chernoff Stevie was little. Stevie was a little kid. Oh, he was amazing. And he ran around doing things. He would do whatever you asked him to do. He was just so helpful and wonderful. And
I miss him so much. I miss him every time I go up to the theater. It's when I go backstage, because either I stage managed and he assistant stage managed, or he stage managed and I assistant stage managed. Being in the wings without him is lonely.
It is. It really is. And he, again, when I was coming up, he was younger than I was, and I was like sophomore, junior in high school, and he was, maybe early middle school. And if you asked him to do something, he was on it. If you said you needed something, he handled it. Like, even at that young age, he was your Johnny on the spot. I got this. Yep. I can do it. And he was just an amazing, amazing person to have back there. And even being so young, I would always put him on a crew. Always.
Oh, absolutely.
You never had any worries about him. So I was very fortunate. I had some great people around me coming up. And that's one of the things that drew me back, was that community, that sense of community. So speaking of like Rich Hybe and Brian Donahue, is there a director that has inspired you?
Suzanne Donahue. She was the first director that I ever worked with, and that was actually at Hard Bargain. And I have worked with her a couple other times, and I'd been in a couple of church plays, which are, were nothing like, community theater. But I did the Miss Firecracker contest down there, and I had like the male lead part. I was Delmont Williams, and I had never been in a show before, and moving around on stage, I just wasn't good. I didn't know what I was doing, and she was very patient, and she gave me these little exercises to get me out of my own head so that I wasn't stiff. And she worked really hard with me to get me, like I said, to get me out of my own head and to make me feel more comfortable up there. And she's very, she's a very good sounding board when you try things, because if it doesn't work, she just tells you, nah, that just, it just didn't work, and she's very good with, she can be a tough director, which you need, but she's also a very encouraging director. Because she's not going to be overly nice, and if she sees a bunch of garbage up there, she's not going to, I'll just let it go because it would just be too hard to fix it or whatever. No, if it's not good, she's going to fix it. And I'm a terrible dancer, and I've been on stage in shows, and she'll tell me, she'll say, you need to get with one of the lead dancers and work on this, because this is not too good. I can see you looking at your feet and stuff like that. And that's true. I'm not a good dancer. And so she tells you what you may not always want to hear it, but you need to hear it because it's what the show needs. But she's honest, and she's not mean-spirited, and she won't call you out or be nasty in front of other people. And it's nothing that she doesn't say for other members of the cast and stuff like that. So she's very honest, and I've always liked that about Suzanne. She's very good, but like I said, she's very encouraging, and when things are going well, she's very excited about it, and you can't help but catch her enthusiasm for things when they're going well, and so you want to do what needs to be done for the show. So she's always been my first director and still my favorite director.
I've worked with her, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. She's very respectful. She knows how to give a criticism that is useful and constructive. And that's an important skill, because not everybody has mastered that.
No, that's the honest to goodness truth.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I have enjoyed working with her, and I certainly enjoy watching her navigate as she goes through the process. So I think she's amazing. I really enjoy that. I really do. So what show would you absolutely love to direct?
I would love to direct. It's a show I submitted to the Playroom Committee one time. I would love to direct the Sugar Bean Sisters. The Sugar Bean Sisters is, hold on to your hat, set in a swamp. It's set in a swamp in Florida. It's about these two sisters. It's in a swamp in Florida. They live in this little shack, and it's all hooked up with, even though it's summer, it's all hooked up with Christmas lights. And this is, I believe I'd have to again, my memory is a little off on the exact date. I think it's been 7 years. One of the sisters was abducted by aliens, and she was returned. So this is a 7-year anniversary, and she is expecting the aliens to come back and get her. And so she's the older sister. She's very brusque and very very rough going sister. And then her younger sister would be the middle of what would be three sisters, but the youngest sister ran off, and they think she died in the swamp and was eaten by alligators. But the middle sister has just recently converted to Mormonism, and she's in love with the local Mormon minister, even though she's good probably 10 or 15 years older than him. And she's she constantly is wearing a wig or something, because she was injured in like an explosion in or something fell on her head and hit her in like a candy factory or something like that. And she's got all this money that she got from the settlement, and she's hidden it in the outhouse that's out there. And so this strange woman shows up out of nowhere. And the weird thing about the sisters is that the sugar bean family is like a curse on the family, because their father was hung for poisoning the girls at a beauty pageant. He poisoned all the girls at a beauty pageant, and they died, and then he was hung. So they're all kind of looked down upon, the girls are. And so this weird woman that they call her like the bird lady, she shows up, and she breaks in the house, and she's looking for the money. She's going to try and steal this money. And they come back and find her in the house. And then another lady who's like a voodoo lady, she's like a Haitian woman, shows up, and she's Snake Woman. And she comes in and she knows things about all of these women, and because she's magical. And it's really an offbeat, weird show with cool little special effects and stuff in it. It's funny. It's and it's got the swamp in it, which I require. It's a show with 4 older women in it. I guess the snake lady could be younger, but the ladies would be mid to late 30s up to 40s, 50s ish type of thing. So it's 4 older ladies and 1 male. But it's a comedy. It's all set in one evening. The shack is out in the swamp. They've got their Christmas lights up inside the house. They've got all kinds of goofy things set up, and it's got an outhouse on one side in a cornfield or sugarcane field and all kinds of stuff like that. So I would love to do it because it's a really, really cool show. Cindy is the one who told me about it. Yeah, Cindy Johnson is the one who suggested it.
I can hear her voice in my head describing it. That's the funniest thing. I could just hear her in my head.
Oh, it's really a funny show. There may be a copy of it in the library, so check it out if you want to. And if I ever get a chance to, because I was supposed to do it down at Hard Bargain, and I even talked to Chris about building it, but it was too hard of a build at that time because you have to build a house for it. But I have since looked on YouTube, and I found a skeletal build of the house that we could have done down there, although I didn't know it at the time. But you still have a good bit of furniture that would go in it. That might make it a little bit problematic to do it Hard Bargain. But I've seen the skeletal build, and it really looks cool, and it would be great lighting, and it would be really cool mood, and you could have fog and all kinds of really cool lighting, and we could use Tommy's big moon and all kinds of cool stuff.
That sounds amazing.
I could see being used in the show, and all kinds of mood sounds, crickets and stuff like that. It would be a lot of fun, I think.
Very cool. Very cool. Well,
and a swamp.
I'm telling you, now I have to be in a show with a swamp.
It's great.
I feel like I have not been complete in my theater experience until I do a show in a swamp.
That's right.
And I don't have to be on stage. I just have to have something to do with a show that has a swamp.
That's right.
Well, Keith, I have missed you so much.
I missed you.
And it's so good to see you and be able to talk to you. And I really do appreciate your time tonight.
No problem.